Happy Saturday, scientists. Let's review. As you might have guessed, we're now in the final topic for Biology Paper 1, and that's B3, or Organism Level Systems. There's a worksheet in the description if you'd like some extra practice questions, and we look forward to answering your questions in the comments. This topic begins with the nervous system, and that's what you use to control your muscles and to sense the environment around you. And so we're going to start off with some key words. And the first of those is the stimulus, which is a change in the environment. This could be something that you see or hear, and it will be detected by cells that we call receptor cells. These are cells that can detect changes in the environment. And receptor cells are specific to what they're detecting. So there are pain receptors and temperature receptors and etc. Eventually they'll pass that on to an effector, which is a group of cells that can carry out the response. That might be some muscles that are going to move you away from danger. It might be some glands that are going to secrete a hormone in response to this. There's all sorts of different ways that you can respond to things that are going on around you. Your central nervous system, or CNS, is made up of your brain and your spinal cord. And the spinal cord is the group of nerve cells that run down through the inside of your spine, and they're protected there. Together with the brain, they'll make decisions on how you're going to respond to the stimulus that you have. Your nervous system itself is made up of three main types of nerve cell or neuron. The first of these is your sensory neuron. And it is going to take the signal from the stimulus, from the receptor, and it's going to pass that signal along and into the central nervous system. It looks a little bit like this, although this is not the greatest of drawings. As you know, I'm not an art teacher. This part of the nerve cell is called the dendron. And then there is a cell body with a nucleus. And then coming out the other side, there is an axon. And the signal will move this way along from the dendron through into the axon. The next one are your relay neurons. And these will have many different connections to many different nerve cells that are bringing them all sorts of different information. So they'll be in the brain and in the spinal cord, and they'll also be connected out to many different cells. So they'll be able to send that signal in a number of different directions, depending on what's going on. The ends, these little connections here, are the dendrites, and they'll connect to a bunch of different neurons that are coming in, and the signal will come up and in this way, and then it will be sent out via the axon on the other side and sent on either to another relay or to a motor neuron. And the motor neuron is going to be able to carry the response to the effector. The motor neuron is going to have some very short dendrites, and then they merge into a dendron that is nearly right at the cell body. And then it has a very long axon to carry the signals to the final destination. You'll often see these drawn with some specialized cells on the outside that are there to help increase the nerve signal, and they'll line the dendron and axon of larger and longer nerve cells. Now, with these nerve cells, we have two types of responses. We have a reflex arc and we have a coordinated response. The reflex arc is much simpler. It'll detect a change in the environment and it'll respond to that change, kind of pre-programmed in, if you will. This is not something that you learn, it's something that is inbuilt to your nerves. And this is usually a response to get you out of danger. You'll have some form of stimulus that will be passed on and detected by a receptor, which will pass it on to a sensory neuron, which will pass it on to a relay neuron in the spinal cord. And this will pass it back out to a motor neuron, which will pass it on to an effector, which will then have whatever response was there. For example, if you were pulling your hand away from a hot stove, the stimulus would be the heat, the receptor cells would be your thermal receptors in your skin, and then the response would be that you'd pull your hand away from this as quickly as possible. But this response isn't coordinated. A coordinated response involves the brain, and it can involve many different effectors responding. And it is something that needs to be learned. Not all of these responses in our body are quite so rapid as the electrical signals in a nerve. We have a few that are done by our endocrine system, and these take a little bit longer to go, but they can sometimes have a more permanent effect. There are 3 new keywords that you need here: an endocrine gland, which is going to produce a chemical messenger or a hormone, and that is secreted internally. So endocrine meaning internal to the body. And then you have a target organ, and there might be more than one, and those are the ones that are targeted by the hormone. So they're the ones that will respond to this message. And lastly, but most importantly, we have the concept of homeostasis, which is the process of maintaining constant conditions. For example, your body will keep a constant body temperature of around 37 degrees Celsius, and there are other conditions such as blood pressure and blood glucose levels that will try and keep the same. The endocrine system is made up of a number of different glands, and each of these glands secretes different hormones. If we look at the human body, we are going to have glands that are located in a number of different places. In the head, we are going to have the hypothalamus and pituitary glands, and these are involved in regulating the responses of the other glands. In the neck, you are going to have the thyroid gland, which is going to secrete thyroxine, which is involved in cell energy levels and body energy levels. On your kidneys, or just above your kidneys, so if those are your kidneys, then just above them here, you have the adrenal glands, or the next to kidney glands, and they're going to produce a hormone called adrenaline, which is involved in the fight or flight response. And then, depending on your sex, you'll have either ovaries or testes, and those will be hormones that are associated with your sex-linked characteristics. So estrogen and progesterone in females, and then in males, testosterone. If you're studying the higher syllabus, you need to understand that these hormones are used to produce feedback cycles, and the most common of these is the negative feedback cycle. And this is a cycle where the stimulus will be detected, and then the response is going to come, but it's going to try and feed back, and it's trying to be stopping that stimulus from happening. So the response will try and stop the stimulus. So for example, if someone's talking in class and the teacher tells them to stop talking, the stimulus was the person talking, the response was the stop talking, and it's trying to diminish the stimulus in the first place. A really good example of this is the thyroxine cycle. It is controlled by the hypothalamus. It will be the one that's going to detect some changes. So it's going to detect that energy levels are low. And so the hypothalamus is going to tell the pituitary gland to secrete another hormone called thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH. The pituitary gland is going to secrete this hormone. TSH is going to tell the thyroid to bring up its levels of thyroxine. So we're going to get thyroxine levels going up. And that is going to mean that energy levels are going to go up because there's more thyroxine available. And the hypothalamus will detect that. Then we're going to stop producing TSH. Which will mean we stop producing thyroxine. Which will mean that eventually the energy levels will drop back down again, and we'll need to start going back through this cycle. So this cycle continues happening all of the time in order to maintain homeostasis, in order to maintain those energy levels in your cells. But you also have hormones that come in and try and sort of mess with these cycles and increase or change things around. And so adrenaline is one of those hormones, and it will come in and it will get your body ready to respond to a situation. So you're going to increase respiration. You're going to increase your heart rate. You're going to divert blood away from areas where you don't need it. This is going to get you ready to respond to something that is causing your body danger. And when you remove that danger, then the adrenaline cycle will stop. And so all of these rates of respiration or blood flow will drop down to their normal rates again. One of the most complicated cycles in the human body in terms of the sheer number of hormones that get involved is the menstrual cycle, or the cycle that prepares the uterus to be ready for an embryo to implant. And the first hormone that sort of kicks this cycle off is FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone. So you might see it referred to as FSH. And what it is going to do is it's going to prepare the egg, or mature the egg. And it does this by stimulating the follicle, which is a group of cells that is going to mature the egg. And then if you're on the higher syllabus, you need to know that FSH will also cause the ovaries to secrete estrogen. Estrogen itself is going to be made in the ovaries, and it is going to build up the uterine lining. And for those of you on the higher syllabus, it is going to cause the pituitary gland to secrete another hormone. And that hormone is luteinizing hormone. The pituitary is going to prioritize luteinizing hormone, and it will stop production of FSH. Luteinizing hormone is only on the higher syllabus, and what it does is it causes ovulation. So it causes the release of the egg on approximately day 14. The next hormone is progesterone. And this hormone, if you think about what the word might mean, then you can figure out what it does. So the word gestation refers to the period of development of the embryo, and pro is something that's for that or supporting that. So progesterone is there to support gestation. And what it will do is it will maintain the uterine lining. If the embryo implants, then progesterone secretion will be taken over by that, and it will be maintained throughout the pregnancy. If there's no implantation, then the progesterone secretion stops, and that starts the whole cycle again. And the reason this is able to control the whole cycle is because progesterone is able to inhibit the LH production. This cycle will repeat approximately every 28 days, with the hormones regulating each other and causing the different events to happen in turn. We can use some of these hormones in the methods of contraception, and the best way to study these is really just to go and read about them and to make sure you know the facts on them. Some potential areas of questions on your exam is going to be the actual versus theoretical effectiveness. If you think about these, the actual effectiveness is often lower than the theoretical effectiveness because it takes into account human factors. So, for example, not using the condom correctly or not taking the pill at the appropriate time. And so you might be asked about why there would be those differences there. And you might be asked to answer sort of an application question where you talk about whether or not the human factor could indicate someone's choice of method, depending on whether or not they felt capable of using the conditions or of using the method properly. For those of you studying the higher syllabus, you also have a topic that is quite interesting, which is the treatment of infertility. So infertility can be caused by a number of things. On the male side of things, there could be a blocked sperm duct, or some sort of issue with the sperm, so there might not be enough sperm, for example. And on the female side, we might have issues with lack of mature eggs, and we might have issues with the ovaries not releasing an egg. And these two can be treated using hormones, and the hormones we're going to use to treat them are FSH and LH. Because FSH is going to allow the ovaries to develop a number of eggs, so you're going to add some FSH injections there, and those will cause many eggs to develop. And then you can also add some LH to release those eggs. And if that's not enough, then what you might do is you might move into in vitro fertilization, or IVF. In vitro meaning in glass. And so what they'll do here is they'll collect those eggs that you've just caused to mature, and then you will mix egg and sperm. And you'll check that you have actually got some fertilization that has happened, and then you will implant those fertilized embryos. And because this is difficult and expensive, you'll usually implant 1 or 2 embryos to make sure that at least one of them takes. And so in many cases, this actually results in multiple births, and that can be one of the reasons that this could be medically difficult, because multiple births will increase the stress on a body. There are also some moral issues around this that different people have different perspectives on, and your exam might ask you to consider those perspectives and how people might feel about that. So do take a quick look through those and what things people would consider when they're thinking about IVF and whether or not it's a good thing. One of the most important cycles in the human body is the control of blood sugar. And when this isn't working properly, it can lead to diabetes. And that is a medical condition that, if not managed, can have some very severe consequences. I feel that it's helpful to visualize this as a cycle. In the middle, we will put our normal blood glucose levels. And if you eat something, for example, then you're going to increase those levels. And that will be detected by the pancreas. So the pancreas has detected an increase, and what the pancreas is going to do is it's going to release insulin. And that is going to have 2 effects that are both going to be to bring these levels back down. The first effect it's going to have is it's going to cause the liver and muscles to store glycogen. And glycogen is a long chain of sugars, so it's going to take the glucose, it's going to chain them up into these long glycogen chains, and then it can kind of store that energy for later use. And the second thing it does is it helps the glucose to get into the cells. There's also some effects in terms of fat cells and increasing their conversion of glucose into fat that all help to bring blood sugar levels back down to normal. Now, if you're studying the higher syllabus, you also need to know what happens in the reverse. And so if you, for example, if you exercise, or just sort of as you live, your blood glucose levels are going to drop down in between the times when you eat. And that is also going to be detected by the pancreas. It is going to cause the release of a different hormone. It is going to cause the release of glucagon. And I like to remember this by thinking that glucagon is released when glucose is gone. And that is going to have the opposite effect. So the liver and muscles will break down their glycogen. And that will be released into the blood to bring up those blood sugar levels. There is also some effects in terms of those fat cells as well. They might release some glucose. The goal really is to increase the levels back up to normal. And so this is the conclusion of B3, which is a little bit shorter of a topic, but some of the concepts are a little bit more difficult to understand. So I do hope that you take a look at the revision questions that are available to you, that you ask any questions you have in the comments below, and that you have excellent luck as you study for your exams.